So today's mamar is actually going back to Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and it's a very, very unique mamar because it is so relatable. It deals with a very, very basic idea of I am completely uninspired. I've got nothing there. What do I do? And so a lot of people, when it comes to their Judaism, when they become uninspired, they just drop things. And so this is not something new. This is an age-old problem. And it's obviously integral to be able to answer these questions in order for us to be able to function as people who endeavor to be spiritual, people who endeavor to be connected to God as much as possible. We're going to have to deal with that. This is part of life, is dealing with not being inspired. And this mimer takes a classic story from Tanakh and completely and absolutely just reveals a whole new level to it. So the Alter Rebbe actually has two maimarim on this story in Tanakh about Elisha and the woman whose husband had died, and she doesn't have anything. The prophet gives her a blessing, as we'll see, and then she's able to make a killing in the oil industry. And today we're going to learn the first of these two maimarim. Afterwards, we're going to learn the second of the maimarim as the Rebbe treats it. So we're going to get a kind of a double dose of this. The first maimar deals with a particular way of answering the question, what should I do if I'm not inspired? And the second one takes a little bit of a deeper dive into the whole concept of what's the point of my not being inspired. So with that, let's start with a little story. So italics here at the top of the page, PDF, Achas, Achat, for those of us who speak modern Hebrew. Achat Mishe Bnei Nevi'im. So a certain woman, the wife of one of the disciples of the prophets, cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead. And you know how your servant revealed the Lord. My husband was a God-fearing person. And now a creditor is coming to seize my two children as slaves." So Elisha says to her, "What can I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She replied, "Your maidservant has nothing at all in the house except a jug of oil. Go," he says, "and borrow vessels from the outside, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Don't limit yourself. Kelim rekim al tamiti. Don't hold back. Get as many empty vessels as you possibly can. Then go and shut the door behind you and your children and pour oil into all those vessels, removing each one as it is filled." She went away. She shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing vessels to her, and she kept pouring. When the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." He answered, "There are no more vessels," and the oil stopped. She came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go and sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your children can live on the rest." So like I said, this is basically a story. When you read it in Tanakh, you don't see anything more than, wow, it's an amazing story. It's a story of miracles. And actually, when you're looking at the context of Tanakh and why it's telling these stories, it's actually part of the process. There is that Elisha is the student of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. And before Elijah goes up to heaven, he asks Elisha, "What can I do for you?" Elisha says, "I want to have double your capabilities." And so therefore the Tanakh goes and tells us several more miracles that were done over the miracles that Eliyahu Hanavi did. And so that, in the context, is a very, very simple way of looking at things, and okay, it's a miracle story. Believe in God, believe in God's miracle workers, believe in prophecy and all that kind of thing. That's a very, very, very simple way of looking at it. Now, here's a little confession. When you learn Chassidus, you start developing a certain understanding that nothing is as it seems. Everything is much, 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 much deeper than what you thought it was. And as a result of that, that gives you a certain appreciation, a very, very deep appreciation, because everything that you learn, you realize has so much more depth. And so therefore, all the questions are valid, all the questions are important. And the question is just, where can we find the insight into finding perspective on those questions? But it also has a certain, shall we say, evil inclination that I'm going to give you insight into, a little bit of the Chabad psyche. Because you know that everything is incredibly deep. So therefore, it's a little bit frustrating when you learn something and you don't have the explanation sitting there in front of you. You're like, okay, what's going on here? What's the deeper element? And if you're lazy, you just get stuck there and you're like, I know there's something else here, but I'm too lazy to be able to explore it further. So that's a little bit of that frustration is something that comes up often because you realize that everything has so many more levels and so many more layers to be able to unpeel, and we're just regular people trying to go through our day and pay our bills and that kind of thing, and so it's a little bit frustrating in terms of that. Here, the Alter Rebbe gives us this insight. And like I said, there's going to be two different ways that the Alter Rebbe deals with this story. And we're going to focus on the first one here. Both of them are absolutely true. Both of them, they don't contradict each other in any way whatsoever. They just give you different angles into the insight into this basic question. And the Rebbe actually brings, when we learn the Rebbe's Maimer, the Rebbe extrapolates the ideas further, we're going to see the Rebbe asks a question. He says, there's no such thing as just a story. Everything has to have a deeper purpose. And so we need to understand what is the deeper purpose of the story. It's not just for the purpose of telling beautiful stories, cute stories, special stories, interesting stories. That's not the point. The point is there has to be something that is deeply important and informative and moving to us in our world now, living, about 3,000 years after Elisha and this woman did. So for that, let's look at this one. The Alter Rebbe says, Rabbi Shneir Zalman says, on a metaphorical level, his story can be interpreted in this way. The woman, who is the woman? The woman refers to the soul, which is alternatively referred to in rabbinic texts as the daughter of a priest or the daughter of our patriarch Avram. She is unified with God himself as the soul is a portion of God himself. So the soul is speaking. The soul is struggling. The soul is going to cry out. Now that's something that all of us know. Every so often, the soul cries out, I want. What's going on? Well, what's the problem with the soul? We'll see. She is called the wife of one of the disciples of the prophets. And that's in reference to the fact that prior to her investment into the body, the soul grasps great and lofty concepts about God's revelation and how God's revelation would vest itself into this world in order to enliven it. This cognition is similar to a physical prophet's understanding of his prophecy. A prophet, unlike the way people think of him, is not just somebody who's a soothsayer or a future teller or a prognosticator of any type. A prophet's job is to be able to perceive spiritual ideas, to draw them down into the world in such a way that they have a practical implication. That's what a prophet does. And so that's the reason why a prophet has a deeply spiritual place in Judaism. And that's, if you look at the prophecies of Ezekiel, of Achas, he talks about the chariot, what that was. And those prophecies about things going on in spiritual worlds that are things that on the mortal world we don't see. His job is to interpret those spiritual concepts into such a way that the human mind can understand them. The soul, at one point, did have a spiritual cognition, a very deeply spiritual cognition, and that was because of its deep rootedness in godliness itself. The soul itself is part of God. And so therefore its understanding of godliness and its understanding of spirituality, true spirituality, godly spirituality, the divine, the system of creation and all that, it was not just aware of these concepts before it came down into a body, but these ideas were part of its very being, and that was part of its process, was to be able to explore these concepts, explore these spiritual worlds, and that was its experience prior to coming down into the world. Coming down into the world is a huge descent. It's a tremendous, tremendous struggle. And Chassidic texts talk about why would the soul want to come here in the first place? If it's on such a high level, it's so connected to godliness, why would it want to come into a world of falsehood, a world where we see the things that we see? In other words, we see a table, we see a bookshelf, we see a house, we see physical things, and we don't recognize the godliness that keeps it all in existence. The soul recognizes those things as true, but now that it's stuck in a body, it's got issues. Most of us might have noticed that. So now that the soul is in the body, he continues, she cries out to Elisha. Who is Elisha? Well, obviously Elisha back then was the prophet, but the word Elisha is made up of two words. Keli Shah, which means, my God, pay attention. Visha Hashem el Hevel v'minchato Hashem turned, Hashem paid attention to Hevel and his offering to God. That's the word Shah, Shin Ayin. And she cries out, God, please hear me, listen to me. What's she crying? She says, your servant, my husband, is dead. Ishi met. What is the word Ishi? The word Ishi can be read as my fire of God. Esh Sheli. Which Esh? The Esh of Yud. The Esh of God. She's therefore calling out, the passion that I have for God is dead. I not only do not have any love or awe of God, but even the lowest level of fear, the lowest level of awe, which is fear of punishment. God, please don't strike me dead. We're coming up on Rosh Hashanah. God, please give me life. Don't kill me, right? That lowest level, complete and absolute self-interest, self-preservation, it's died. It's gone. I've got nothing there. Avdecha, your servant, Ishi, my passion for God, met, is dead. And she continues, and she says, you know how your servant revered the Lord. You know how your servant revered God. When I was still in the Garden of Eden, before coming down into a body, I had proper awe and proper love, true love and awe of God, as all other souls do. But now that I've been clothed in a body, what's the problem? She says, a creditor is coming to seize my two children as slaves. Meaning, the evil inclination wants to take those two children. Two children are referred to, if you remember from our previous Mamar, we spoke about the fact that the woman gives birth to children. The two children are my love and awe of God, and he wants to take them and enslave them to evil desires and to awe and respect of mundane things. So the feelings that I have that should be driving me towards godly and divine purpose are not only gone, but the evil inclination wants me to take those things and focus my passion and excitement and drive towards whether or not my baseball team won or lost. That's on a mundane level. But on a deeper level, on a worse level, is obviously if I'm excited and driven about things which are not okay. So if I'm unfortunately driven after a particular actress or something like that. So my focus, my passion, my excitement is about somebody who is forbidden to me. That's obviously a major problem. And that could be both, obviously, passion and love. That's quite obvious. But that also could be true of respect. That I respect things that are inappropriate to be respected. That I have awe for somebody or something that would be considered inappropriate to be in awe of that person or of that particular thing. A replacement of the divine with something that's mundane. So my passion for God is dead. Not only that, but whatever that's there, whatever energies I have is being usurped for negative elements. So Elisha, or as we just explained, or a God responds to her, what can I do for you? And these words, what can I do for you, are really, really powerful. Why does Elisha need to say that? He has an idea that he gives her right away. The Alter Rebbe says something really powerful. He says, now that you sunk yourself into the depths of negativity, what can I do for you? God says, I can't do anything. You made those choices. You brought yourself there. Don't blame it on me. You need to do something for yourself. That's really, really, really an important concept because we're coming up on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for that matter. And a lot of people come into Rosh Hashanah and they expect to be inspired by the chazan or by the rabbi or whatever it is, and they expect to be turned on. It's not so simple. The Rebbe once told the Israeli advisor to five different prime ministers, Yehuda Avner. He said to him, Yehuda Avner said to the Rebbe, have you turned on my spiritual light? And the Rebbe said to him, I've given you the match. Okay, only you can turn on your flame. And that's true of every single one of us. We can learn something that's incredibly inspiring. We can hear something that's incredible. We can be moved to tears on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. But if we don't take that energy and use it out, then it's basically, well, there's nothing there. Only we can do something. And so God is responding to the soul. What can I do for you? I can't do anything for you. I'm giving you free choice. You do it yourself. Now you want to know, where are you going to get the energy for that from? I'll tell you. Continues and he says, tell me, what do you have in the house? What capabilities or energies do you still have which are still attached to the divine and are not under the control or the influence of the evil inclination? And the soul replies, actually, virtually nothing. The soul replies, your maidservant has nothing at all in the house. Everything was taken from me except a jug of oil. So she admits that she still has a small flask of flammable liquid in her heart. Oil is a reference to Chachma. Chachma is the first stage of the intellectual process, and it's the flash of intuition, the flash of inspiration. And we're referring to as it is connected to the divine on the highest of levels, not just intellectually, but basically in terms of the whole schematic of creation. This is the first stage of creation. And she says, I still have that element of spirituality that was given to me from the first stages of creation. The one thing that remains in the soul is the singular point of Chachma, meaning the innermost and hiddenmost spark of the heart. And the next mimer that we're going to discuss the same concept, he explains a little bit clearer. He says the essence of the soul. The very, very, very essence of the soul. And God says to her, you do have something. You have something that's usable. And he says to her, go and borrow vessels from the outside, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Don't limit yourself. This was translated in Sepharia. When I pulled the translation down, they said as many as you can. But as many as you can is a very incorrect translation because the words there are al tamiti. Al means don't. Tamiti, from the word mat. Don't limit yourself. Get as many as you can. Yes, that's true to get as many as you can, but don't limit yourself. And that don't limit yourself is really, really important in terms of the spiritual concept. Go, involve yourself, the Alter Rebbe says, in the garments of the soul, in Torah and mitzvot. Right now it seems like they are empty, missing the passion of love and awe, but go get those empty vessels. Go get not just as many as you can, but don't limit yourself by saying the fact that they're empty. Don't say, why is my mitzvah or why is my study worthwhile if it's empty? It says, no. That's not the point. Go, don't limit yourself. Go get as many empty vessels as possible. Well, what's the point if they're empty? Everybody gets frustrated when they're just empty. And he says, then go in and shut the door behind you and your children. You will go and gather your strength and capabilities, meaning the love and law, which right now seem to be scattered among all the negative elements of life, and return them to God, and pour oil into all those vessels. You will use them to refill all those mitzvot and the Torah you did without energy. When you close the door behind yourself, when you lock yourself in with just yourself and just your Torah and mitzvot, when you refocus with yourself and all those empty vessels, you'll find that that little tiny jug of oil will actually start to fill all of those empty vessels. You thought that the passion and energies were already taken captive. No, they were there. They were just scattered in everything else. They were pulled everywhere else that you are, in your business, in your hobbies, in your all the extraneous things of our lives. They were everywhere else. But now you're shutting the door and you're closing the door inside with yourself and with your children and with the empty vessels. And you'll see that all of those empty vessels will suddenly find themselves being filled. And if you do so, you and your children can live on the rest. You will truly be able to live from the experience as one appreciates his light from after coming from darkness. So this is a quote from Mishlei. King Shlomo said, I've seen the greatness or the advantage of light from darkness. So there's actually two different ways of looking on a very simplistic level. When you are in a dark place and you suddenly come out to the light, you're overwhelmed and you appreciate the light. There are museums that give you the experience of allowing you to go through the experience of what it's like to be blind. And they put you through a maze. You have to, feel your way through. And when you come out, it's such a shocking experience. Color has a brand new appreciation. It's everything totally. So there's a new appreciation for light as a result of the darkness. But actually, what Chassidus picks up, oh my gosh. Yeah. I apologize to those of you in the waiting room. I was so focused on the class, I didn't notice you guys. So when we're talking about this concept of the advantage of light coming from darkness, Chassidus also focuses on something that's much deeper. And we're going to explore this more in the next mimer that draws out this idea further. And he says, even greater than that is the light itself that comes from darkness. When there's something that is able to be extracted from what seems to be evil, that becomes even greater. That's a very deep idea. It's actually appropriate for Rosh Hashanah. It's actually one of the reasons why we dip apples in honey. Honey is actually a liquid that is the only liquid which is kosher, even though it comes from a non-kosher animal. A bee is not kosher. Any other liquid that comes from a non-kosher animal is not kosher. But the idea is that even though after an entire year there was also some negativity there, but we're extracting the goodness from it. We're saying we're going to grow as a result of it, and we're not going to just say that I am terrible because of everything that happened. We're going to extract the goodness from it. Not only extract from it, but because it becomes the sweetest thing possible. It becomes honey. What can be sweeter than honey?
Rabbi,
yes.
What was the idea of the closing of the door again?
The idea of closing the door is almost refocusing yourself, cutting yourself off to some degree from the outside, from the things that were distracting you before, and coming to terms with the fact that these energies are within yourself and you have the capacity to be able to use them if you focus them. So you can imagine it, for a sports addict, I guess, for such a person on Rosh Hashanah or on Shabbos or on any major holiday, for them to be able to take the time off of the scores, and even though whatever's going on, a pennant race or whatever it is, you can tell I'm a baseball guy. Keep bringing baseball analogies. For them to turn that off is this element of refocus within themselves. So that's the idea here. So we're saying that even greater than that is this light that comes from darkness, and it's for this reason that our sages state the place in which Balei Teshuvah stand, even a completely righteous person cannot stand. And so Balei Teshuvah are able to reach levels of godliness, of cognition of the divine, and focus and passion and energy that even the perfectly righteous cannot possibly get to, because of the fact that they're able to extract those energies from a negative place. Question?
I was going to say something about when you were talking about the empty, bring all the empty vessels. In other words, to me, it's I need to empty myself of all the stuff from the world and allow the spirituality some growth.
That's absolutely correct, and that's what we're going to we're going to talk about in the next mimer, that exact concept.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Exactly what we're going to talk about.
Sorry to bother.
But right now, I wanted to start with this one because the second one, the Rebbe extrapolates the idea further. But I wanted to start with this one because I find this one so relevant. I don't feel like putting on tefillin today. I've got no energy. My davening has no passion, has no focus. I'm not there. Right? That might be true. Today, I'm going to do it as an empty vessel. Tomorrow, I'll do it as an empty vessel. Maybe over the next 6 months, I'll do it as an empty vessel. But over time, it's going to refill. And when it refills with a flammable liquid. And that flammable liquid will, in fact, burn at some point. And I find this incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important, incredibly invigorating. Because there are times where we're just absolutely exhausted and we're not in the mood for Rosh Hashanah or for Yom Kippur or for any particular spiritual whatever it is. And during those times, it's here using the story that I remind myself, I'll be okay. We'll get there. Just don't limit those empty vessels. So this is part one, and we'll continue the extrapolation of this idea, God willing, next week. Wish everybody a k'tiva v'chatima tova, shana tova, a really, truly, truly good year, a sweet year, and a year of all the blessings ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Question? Absolutely. Any
Like I said,
questions?
Stay well.
Same to you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Shana
See you
Tova.
Taiba.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
It's not gonna